Yeah, I think we will just be starting because one of our speakers and guests today has limited time, and I think we have to make use of it most as we can. So I'll just start with a very brief introduction and then give the word to our first speaker. Thank you all for joining. This is the first webinar in a series of 5 in which the ReCirc Consortium will discuss circular economy and resource recovery in both Singapore and the Netherlands, and aiming for a broader scope, of course. So we have mostly people joining from either the Netherlands, so morning time, or later afternoon in Singapore. Our current focus for this first webinar will be on Singapore as a circular city. This sounded like a nice opportunity for all of the authors of a recently published paper on Singapore as a circular city to gather and to explore what is happening in Singapore, what is happening in the Netherlands, and see if we can have a nice group discussion on it. There is some technical pointers for both the speakers and attendees. If there is anything that you need help on or that you would like to ask as a question, please put it in the chat box. And we will be addressing those questions later. So please put them in there. We will have you muted during the meeting, but if there is a question or we need reflection, then Audrey will be there to help you with unmuting and technical support. On the next slide, and we will have room for a Q&A after the panel discussion has ended. So don't worry about that. Let's see. I would start with a very brief introduction, can touch upon this later for a bit longer about what is then ReCirc. We are a public-private partnership between the Netherlands and Singapore that has a focus on resource recovery and circular economy. As we know that only by integrated solutions and by working together, we can actually achieve such a zero waste nation or a circular economy as such. On the next slide, and maybe one further, I would like to give the word to one of the co-authors to the paper that was discussed just before on Singapore as a circular city. He will be joining us for the coming 5 minutes still before he has to jump off the call for yet another meeting and presentation. So I'm very happy that Professor Siram Ramkrishna is with us. Perhaps you could give a brief introduction of yourself, and then we can dive into what is for you the new normal that we are facing.
Thank you, San. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this joint webinar between Netherlands and Singapore. This is a group of experts and passionate individuals interested in sustainability. And thank you so much for joining our efforts, collective efforts on circular cities. My name is Siram Ramkrishna. I'm a professor at the National University of Singapore. I also chair the Circular Economy Task Force, and I work with the various national agencies in thinking about sustainability. I'm also one of the 15 panel members for UNESCO, how to go about higher education, universities, in our transition towards sustainability. So that is a brief background about me. Because time is limited, I like to focus on things that are more interest to you.
Yes, please. So as one of the co-authors of the paper, we have been discussing what it means for Singapore to turn into a circular city. It has been a writing process that has been going on for, I think we started a year pre-COVID, and then all of a sudden our publication happened, and then COVID already emerged or was happening. Right. So when preparing for this webinar, we discussed, are we still looking at Singapore as a circular city as we did before, or what is then the new normal that we are looking at?
Thank you, Son. I agree with you that it was a serendipity that we started working on Singapore and circularity of Singapore much before than COVID-19. And the publication came after a peer review and international checking. It appeared on as a real publication. I'd like to address your question. Is there a new normal? And what is a new normal? I think nobody will disagree with me that more than 95% of the people on the planet are now affected by COVID-19 in one way or other. In addition to COVID-19 impact, there is also rethinking on value-based geopolitics, and we are beginning to see a lot more thinking on the part of the governments, policymakers. And with those two backdrops, if you begin to see the way individuals are thinking about life, about their careers or business opportunities, is different from how they were thinking before. Similarly, businesses as well as governments are also looking at how to come out of COVID-19 and grow sustainably in the years to come. So fundamentally, if a person is thinking differently, if businesses and governments are thinking differently, that means we are in a way entered in a new normal. It is not a precise definition, but it has a number of characteristics which would make us to believe that we are transitioning towards a new normal. So with all this evidence, I'm very certain that all societies around the world are transitioning towards new normal. Question is, what is this new normal? Two things that are really underpinning this new normal. One is COVID-19 impact. Second one is geopolitics-based realignments. These two are making us to think in terms of resilience, be it the country, be it the business. It is also about sustainability. Are we able to grow sustainably so that the future is much more sustainable for the future generations and future years to come? I would like to recap what I said. Two important features that underscore new normal: resilience. Second one is sustainability. Now, coming to, as an authors of this important paper, we have experts from both Singapore as well as Netherlands. When we put this together, even though we were not looking at new normal, but we were looking at how cities can transition to be better cities. Both Netherlands and Singapore have a fantastic city culture. More or less, more than 50% of the population live in the city. And the Netherlands and Singapore have been working together for many decades. For example, raising water levels, which is something Singapore emulated with the help of Netherlands. Singapore has now announced that in the moving forward next 100 years, there is a threat of sea level rise. And that means we need to revisit the way we grow our economy, the way we go about designing our city, the growth of Singapore. So that means spending $100 billion over next 100 years with an eye, what is the impact of extreme weathers on the rising sea levels? How do we mitigate them? What can we do? Under the broad such a policy initiative, if we start looking at the city level, if you see from the point of city management or the way the businesses are run, it's all about decarbonization of the economy, be it the energy sector, water sector, pharmaceutical sector, as well as the services sector. We are already beginning to see green funds, that is, these are the dollars, investment dollars made available for the businesses to move out of COVID-19 in a sustainable way, so that they can come up with the new business models, new growth areas. They are environmentally more good as well as sustainable. So what I like to say is, in a new normal, Singapore takes sustainability very seriously. And it is a serendipity that all of us thought about sustainability and a circular city ahead of time. But after we wrote the paper, you can see what happened. Singapore had elections, and they, after post-elections, which was 2 months ago, they changed the name of the ministry to the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment. Previously, sustainability was not a tagline for any ministerial portfolio. So Singapore now has a Ministry of Sustainability and Environment, which already shows a clear commitment. Second commitment, what I've seen is what they call a post-Paris Agreement. There is a nationally determined contribution, NDC declaration, and Singapore has announced how it is going to decarbonize every sector so that their overall carbon footprint will be lower. So what does that mean from the point of circular cities? It's clear. We are talking about all the energy, either primary energy or secondary energy that goes in running the city, all the transportation systems, as well as all the services that includes finance, trade, need to be built based on the sustainability principles. So there's also distilling towards intellectuals, experts like us, thinking about what is circularity and how we can introduce that in the university education. So this is where all the attendees, as well as the draft, the paper which is published, would be very useful. And I'm very thankful to San for allowing me to give my initial few minutes introduction so that they can go through a much more detailed way.
Thank you, Professor, for setting the stage and providing us with this introduction. I know you have to run, so I'll let you go for now. If we collect any questions by the audience, I am sure to share them with you and to see if we can loop them back to the people attending.
Thank you so much. I wish you all a very good and fruitful webinar. And this is not going to be the last. We will definitely re-engage more often. I'm sure San will tell you all the details. I'm looking forward to be with you in the future as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we've heard the professor state already is that on an academic level, we can start thinking about frameworks, about how to become resilient, how to integrate sustainability. Opportunities for governments, for market players, for finance to start executing. And tipping point that we are currently at. This will also be visited on later when we explain a little bit more about what ReCirc is and what ReCirc is doing already in the execution of of the framework in a way. However, to understand better what we are actually talking about, I would like to introduce the other speakers for today's webinar. Give them the opportunity to, in 1 minute, introduce themselves, share a little bit about what is essential and relevant to know to our audience, and then we'll dive into the content and the framework as discussed. Pei-Shen, may I ask to start?
Hi, I'm Pei-Shen, and I worked on the paper together with everyone else. So what we've been doing now, I'm still keeping up to date with circular economy news in Singapore and examining what's happening with COVID and regarding circular economy. I'm also currently working on a plastics project on reducing plastics. So it's still very relevant, especially at this time where we are seeing an increased use in disposables, and we also see very little people move towards zero waste when they are currently worrying about other things. So I'll talk more about this later after it's my turn to talk about it. But yeah, if you're interested in plastics in Singapore, you can always talk to me too.
Thank you, Pei-Shen.
Thank you.
Case, can I give the word to you for a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, okay, thanks. My name is Kees Roest. I'm working at KWR Water Research Institute in the Netherlands, which is an applied research institute. We are a partner in ReCirc Singapore and working on circularity, trying to make circular systems, for our case, focused on water, and I will tell a bit more about that later during this seminar.
Thank you, Kees. And then we have Ricardo as well. Could you introduce yourselves and we'll dive into your part of the paper.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the ReCirc Consortium for the invitation. My name is Ricardo Weigand. I'm a third year as a PhD student. I collaborated as a co-author of the paper that I will explain a little bit further. And my research focus is on how to bring circular economy as a discipline and future studies also as a discipline, and combine the principles of circular economy and the methodologies of future studies in order to build more resilient SMEs or more future-proof SMEs. And some of this approach is also applicable to the concept of circular cities. So therefore, the interest of also co-authoring this paper.
Thank you, Ricardo. I also thought that people may not know me, so that I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is San, both one of the authors of the paper, and then also the liaison for the ReCirc Consortium. So trying with my company so now to establish circular practices in Singapore and beyond in every way possible. So we design interventions and projects and plans to achieve this circular economy. And for now, I'll just be the moderator and see if we can start with Ricardo on the next slide. And to discuss a bit more, what is the paper actually that we have written and what was our reason to start writing it?
Yes, thank you, Sam. First of all, what I would like to start saying is that when we started doing our literature review and our bibliometric research, and this means finding out all that has been written before, either on Singapore or elsewhere on the concept of circular economy, we found that the concept of circular economy in cities, implemented in cities, is still a concept that needs to be further explored and strengthened. But we were also surprised that in Singapore, there were basically no academic publication that touches the topic. So we were very, very, very committed to start doing research about the concept and about the specific case of Singapore. And when this publication was finally released, we were happy that this manuscript became the first detailed, independent, and comprehensive review of Singapore's approach to circular economy. And for me, it was also important because this sometimes happens with papers. You start speaking about a city state, or even a country, without being ever in that country. So your practical experience is zero, but you are anyway writing an academic paper. So in this case, we were also very happy that San, which was based in Singapore, not right now, also Pei-Shun and Professor Siram were based in Singapore and with a lot of years of experience living in Singapore, either already as locals or as expats. So their experience, for example, in the case of San, being from the Netherlands and also being experienced in other cities in Asia, the concept of circular economy, and then reflecting, but also trying to make a narrative within the paper on her experience on Singapore was of tremendous value to us. In parallel, in the case of Dr. Francesco Pomponi, which is my director of studies, and myself, from different areas of the circular economy as a discipline, we were very involved and very passionate about the concept. So a combination of these two ingredients of having scholars focus on the topic, but also having practitioners in the city or state of Singapore practicing circular economy, I think was a big plus on the paper. And basically, this paper discusses how is Singapore doing in terms of circular economy principles, characteristics, aspirations. We start speaking about the theoretical concept of circular cities, circular metrics, circular economy, And then we felt that it was better to compare two cities, in this case, the city-state of Singapore with the city of Porto in Portugal. And we also dig in all the frameworks that are available to measure circular cities. And we basically pick the one that we thought was the most comprehensive framework.
Perhaps we can see this on the next slide.
Yes, we can see it in the next slide. We will see how it looks, the metrics once you have it in a visual image. But in the next slide, you will actually see the results of Singapore in the third column against the city of Porto. And what is interesting here is that these two authors from Portugal, Fusi and Nero, in 2019, when they wrote the paper on Porto, they came with these fields, so local resources, renewable energy, sea innovation, food, transport, recycling, water management, waste management, education, digitalization, demographic, and policies. And for us was great because all the earliest frameworks didn't touch upon, for example, what was the active population percentage or what was the balance between women and men in politics. So we really like the idea of adding new indicators to measure circularity that also consider social aspects, not just economical or environmental. And very briefly, what we can see is, for example, that Singapore against Porto is doing very good in transport. So, for example, the public transport usage percentage and also the electrical energy used in transportation. Singapore is also doing very good against Porto in, for example, accessibility to smartphones. So there are already very good examples of practices of circular economy in the city-state of Singapore. However, in the indicator number 7, CE innovation budget, and this is something that we emphasize in the paper, there is no budget, at least when the paper was published, allocated to innovate within the city-state in projects that were related with circular economy. So this is one of the points that we conclude the paper with, that will be a great start.
Ricardo, could you give an example of how you see one of those social aspects then contributing to a circular economy?
Yes, well, basically also in our literature review, we found that most of the circular economy papers are focusing either on environmental or on economical issues. And I think that's one of the or one of the reasons behind that is that most of the publications around circular economy happen in Europe. Myself being from a Latin American country, Mexico, and also being aware of how the movement of circular economy happened there, we have more social problems compared probably to a developed economy. So for us in Mexico, the circular economy linked to the social aspects is very important, as important as the economic or environmental. So when you have, for example, a balance of women and men in politics, you are also trying to reduce the gender gap, which is also a social aspect that we need to address that and is linked to the sustainability development goals. Or for example, when you also have the heaviest age group in terms of years in different age groups, for example, the one in Porto and the one in Singapore being very different, then you also can start to have data on how to allocate different resources for the different age groups. Basic education, it's also linked to the social development goals. So access to basic education is very important to not just to start teaching circular economy, but to have an educated population that can reduce the economical gaps, increase equity.
So what you can see that has been done here in a sense is that it's not just the goal to achieve a circular economy, but to see that circular economy as a part of achieving those broader sustainable development goals. And that can only be done if there is also those other elements of actually building a city involved. And it cannot merely be done by production and consumption. It has to be in a social context.
Correct, exactly.
So when we have these comparisons already within the construct of the paper, with this, I would like to introduce our next speaker, which is Kees Roest, who has a lot of experience of actually establishing circularity in the Netherlands. So perhaps, Kees, you could start with giving a brief explanation of what is currently happening in the Netherlands.
Thank you, San. And also already very nice discussions. So in the Netherlands, our Dutch government decided about 5 years ago that we have the aim to become completely circular in 2050, with a sort of halfway circularity in 2030, which is already quite soon, of course. And that's a very big ambition, because completely circular is not easy to achieve, and also it's not completely clear how it should look like. So from KWR, with the water sector as partners, we decided to start a joint research program about water in the circular economy. So the drinking water companies initiated this, and then we worked together with the water authorities and all kinds of other stakeholders in the water sector and around, where we work not only on circularity of the water itself, but also on other aspects. So in the next slide, I have some overview of what we do in a project called Circular Water 2050. So to investigate the impact, but certainly also the opportunities that lead to a fully circular water cycle in 2050. So we have defined 3 activities, of which we are now more or less over half. So the first activity is also to investigate how the water sector operates now. So for water treatment, is it drinking water production or wastewater treatment? You use all kinds of materials. So we made an overview of all the components that are used for this water treatment, and also an overview of resources that are recovered. And then, of course, this also gives insight in resources that can be recovered. So we have quite a detailed material flow analysis of the water cycle in the Netherlands. And one of the things that we still would like to do is to compare this with Singapore. So we are still searching for information, data from Singapore about the water cycle and all the components that are used, so we can compare this with each other. And in one of the next ReCirc Singapore webinars, we hope to come back to that. So hopefully a lot of you will participate again in that seminar. Then in our Circular Water 2050 project, we have activity 2, which is putting a dot on the horizon, because it sounds very good to say that we would like to be fully circular in 2050. But how does that look like? That's not completely clear. So we try to make that clear, and we did some workshops with people from the water sector and around the water sector, because if you want to be circular, you also need to cooperate. It was also mentioned earlier in this session already today, but you need to work together with others. And we tried to put a dot on the horizon, and I will come back to that shortly. And then the third activity is also looking from this future point, dot on the horizon, back to the current situation to determine which possible measures and actions are required, and where you have to take decisions if you go left or right, or to which direction you should go, and what are the decisions that need to be made. Because if you look back to the current situation, then you can define this path.
Could you give an example of that?
Yeah. Also in the next slide, we have a definition of circularity, because if you speak about circularity, you need a definition to define how circularity looks like. And I think it's quite a bit in agreement with Ricardo, his slides, and also what has been discussed in the paper that is published about circular cities. So we took an existing definition of the Socio-Economic Council in the Netherlands, where the circular economy is not only defined as materials and energy that should be recycled and reused, but also in a socially responsible manner within ecological preconditions. So also how the socio-economic values are very, very important in this. And still, this is, of course, is abstract. So if you want to translate this to the application to especially the water sector, and the water sector is enabling also the other sectors and a key part of circular economy, which I think also is very well known in Singapore with already a lot of water reuse. So in the next slide, you see some new model that we defined to evaluate circularity, which can be used as a sort of dashboard model for the water sector, where we have defined 3 different aspects. So in the outer circle, you have the energy and material flows, including water, which can be reused. And if you use energy, because still you use energy, it should be from a sustainable source, and it should be as low as possible in amount. So you can score that compared to another concept or to the existing situation. But besides this, which is a very basic part of circularity, we also have some scoring and parameters for values for people and system properties. Because if you want to achieve circularity, it's not only about reusing materials, but also to keep the safety and the public health. And especially in the current COVID-19 situations, we realize even more than ever that our health and safety are very important and very sensitive. So to become circular, it's a very important aim, but it should also be in comfort and public health and safety and some other aspects that are depicted in this evaluation tool.
And Kees, this is also the model that you are currently applying to Singapore, correct?
Yeah, that's something that we would like to do a bit more, because we still need to get some more numbers from Singapore, from the water sector, which kind of chemicals are used and which kind of products can be produced. For example, phosphorus, as far as I know, it's not yet common practice to recover phosphorus from the wastewater. But this can be recovered and then also be reused again to produce food. So you close circles.
Okay, so let's use this as an active outreach to those attending to see if there's anyone who'd like to contribute and keep updated. And from there, slightly shift towards, again, the city levels in a bit broader scheme to see and to listen to a patient and to hear about what current changes are being made in Singapore.
So, hi, what I'd like to clarify first of all is, as we were working on the paper, at the same time, the government was also working on a zero waste master plan. And we were attempting to publish it, and then they also published the zero waste master plan. So that is the Singapore government's roadmap towards circular economy. The goals themselves have been considered quite ambitious. So, for example, we want to reduce the amount of waste that's sent to landfill by 30% by 2030. And then also wanted to do a completely circular water system, which we have been trying to deal with for quite a while, because Singapore itself is a very small city, very small country, and we have water resource restraints. We have resources restraints in the first place. So we have been trying to work on our water for a very long time, not just currently during this circular economy boom, but since the past when we created this thing called New Water, and there's a system that recycles water. So I think we have learned a lot from countries like the Netherlands on water recycling, and we are continuing to work on this. So a lot of government projects have been moving on, even during this coronavirus period. First of all, we are still working on waste and water problems. In Singapore, I think recently we started building this thing called the Tuas Nexus. And the Tuas Nexus it has both waste and sludge recycling and water recycling. And it's supposed to be built by, I think, 2050. So that is still quite some time in the future. But this is a solid waste system that is in our long-term plan. So what I would say is the Singapore government is still continuing to work on its zero waste master plan goals. And we can see this, it's still reaching out to certain companies like Shell to explore plastic recycling, how to turn pellets into fuel. Whether that is a good thing is completely a different issue, but yeah, the Singapore government is exploring quite a few ways. It also acknowledges that energy resilience is very important. So we are also looking at solar systems for Singapore. But once again, because we are very small, we have limited areas. So I think currently there's this new project that's looking at floating solar panels, and then also working with other countries for that. So this is what we can see that the Singapore government is continuing to do with large businesses. So between businesses and government, it's working. However, what we see, or what I've seen and what I've spoken to other people about, is I realized that small businesses are currently being left out. So small businesses definitely are struggling because of the COVID situation. So the whole tourism sector is gone. Even food, events, all are heavily affected. And we have talked to a businessman who basically said that he's not going to care about circular economy and sustainability when he cannot meet his bottom line. And I think this would apply to most SMEs, even in Singapore or worldwide, which is that they have no bandwidth to look at other issues when their company is at the brink of collapse. So you have the very large MNCs like Shell, like just waste processing companies. Those are large government facilities, and they are still able to fund new innovation. But you have small businesses who are definitely not going to fund innovation or different business models when they cannot meet their bottom line. So what I think is, currently governments are giving out stimulus checks or support to businesses, but they're just giving out that money for employee payments, for certain things that is to survive the day-to-day. And I think what Singapore government or even governments globally can do to push towards circular economy is to really direct funds, so either business incentives or a certain type of funds that you can only collect if you intend to use it in a circular economy way, or in a business innovation that moves you to a circular economy. And I think that would really help us with creating a new normal. So for example, in Singapore recently Singapore Airlines isn't doing very well. So like most airlines across the world, it isn't doing very well. And they wanted to do a flight to nowhere, which is what Taiwan and Australia did. With they let people onto a plane and then they would circle the sky and then go back down, and you didn't have to go to another country with all the risk and everything. So it was for people who enjoy flying and to give them a taste of flying. But SIA wanted to do that, and we immediately had environmentalists who came out and say, I'm not going to take this, and I don't think it's a good thing when we are still trying to reduce carbon emissions. And usually you wouldn't expect this sort of response, but what SIA said was, okay, then we are open to other suggestions. And they completely cancelled Flight to Nowhere, which is very positive for environmentalists. And they did this SIA restaurant experience instead. So You can see that businesses are open to consumer feedback, and they are looking for new ways to innovate as long as there are ideas and support.
Okay, that's super helpful to hear it from somebody with like their feet on the ground and experience it every day. So thank you very much for sharing. With the three speakers that we've heard so far, what I feel we've tried to do is to see on an academic level what kind of framework you would need to actually start assessing Singapore as a circular city, highlighting just briefly some of the outstanding findings of the paper, but then also putting that into an applicable context. So in what way does it start making sense for people that are struggling to get by now on a day-to-day basis? One of the slides that I would like to revisit before diving into the Q&A by heart, it would be slide number 3. If we could pull that up again. There we can see another example of how collaboration and innovating together might actually help achieve that systemic change that is needed. And that also circles back to the series of webinars that we are organizing currently to show what is already happening. To elaborate a little bit more on what is then this consortium that is trying to build these solutions in a public-private partnership. We dubbed it ReCirc. It was established at the end of 2017. By then supported with Dutch government support and moving our group of Dutch companies towards developing a market together with Singaporean partners. And this public-private partnership had as a focus, or has as a focus, that it's aimed at resource recovery to achieve a zero-waste nation or a circular economy. With a variety of knowledge institutes and technology partners, we then focus on 4 different focus areas. One of them, as Pei-Shin already touched upon, would be plastics. Another would be incinerated bottom ashes, also very relevant in the Singaporean context. But another part of it would be, so wastewater and sludge we also have, and food systems. This all needs to be integrated in a bigger whole. And that's where I think you can now see that all of these different layers of interventions can actually start working together. So we have a framework to achieve a circular city. We have then a government that is aligning more and more policies. We have industry that is already building consortia to face this challenge with solutions. Instead of being stuck at the talking, we are now starting to do it. So with this recap or short recap, I would like to move towards opening the floor to questions. There is one question that came in from Jan Jaap, and he is part of the ReCirc Consortium. Jan Jaap, I don't know if you can unmute yourself and if you would like to address the panel yourself. And if that's not possible, then I will just read it out loud. Okay, I'll just read it out loud. We'll save this technical issue for next time. Your question was, we are moving to a new normal, more circular and more sustainable, but do we see the signs of systemic change as well, away from profit-driven shareholder structures to a purpose-driven stakeholder structure? I don't know which one of the panelists would feel eager to take on the question.
Maybe it's also especially a question for the professor who left already. If I personally would give an answer, I don't think that there is such a quick change from profit, but still we learn from this situation, from the new normal, that we are very sensitive and should work together. And that's also what we should do for circularity, to combat climate change, for example. So I hope that also something good from this pandemic exists and comes, so that we work more together and also search for collaborative solutions. And at least in the Netherlands, with our public structure, so from the water authorities and also the drinking water companies, they work in a non-profit way, and that resulted in a very safe and healthy situation for our water infrastructure. So maybe that's an example how it can work, and maybe also should work. But I don't know if that really answers the question.
Yep, I would say that also if we start scoring on all these different variables, it's inevitable that there need to be other KPIs than just profit.
Yeah, but it's one of the KPIs that we also have included. So the financial value, because it should also, you should not lose money if you want to achieve something, and also our comfort and welfare. Yes, it would be a pity to lose that. So we would like to keep our high standards, but we know that we should change the system. But we should change the system in a way that also our future generations can have the nice comfort and welfare that we created all together.
Yeah, so we're looking for gentle disruption.
Yeah, maybe.
Ricardo, I also have a question for you. Let me just find it and scroll through. The question came in from Swati Sharma. Does the report also discuss the methodology for calculating the indicators? Perhaps you could reflect on how you made the decisions and...
Yes, sure. So basically how we calculated the different indicators is using the same methodology than the original authors of the paper from Porto. So we were making sure that we compare, or that we use the same methodology than Ferreira and Fuso Nerini. And all of our sources came from trustworthy data and academic publications, policy publications. So at first, the original framework actually include 27 indicators, but in the end we just showed 19. So we didn't include 8 of the indicators, basically because the corresponding information was not found available for the case of Singapore. Also, in the paper and related to this question, we also made a suggestion on how we think this framework could be improved. For example, including other indicators that touch upon the 3 dimensions, so the social, the environmental, and economic dimensions. So one example would be what is the economic polarization in the region that is being measured. So for example, the income gap between rich and poor, and the percentage of middle-class citizens. Or, for example, another proposal was, what is the economic mobility? What is the life quality index? What is the perception of corruption? To mention just a few.
That will be very interesting to take into account, especially with Singapore as part of the ASEAN economic cluster. So definitely room for follow-up research. What we could do is add a link to the paper itself, perhaps in the chat box. It's also, I believe, in the presentation, which we be sharing after finalizing the webinar. And I see it's already in the chat box. Thank you, Ricardo.
Yes, just want to mention, Sam, that some of the attendees, when they click on the link, may not have access to the publication. So if that's the case, if in the end we can share with them our emails, so they can send us an email and we can send a copy of the publication as well.
Okay, thank you.
PDF itself.
Then, Pechin, I have also a question for you from the chat box from Omar Butler. You have stated that currently and due to COVID, local businesses are struggling, which will make them lose interest in investing in a sustainable approach for the city. But isn't a circular economy enhancing the work of local economies? Isn't that the role of a circular city? So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. For us who know the businesses, business models of circular economy, how it is supposed to help small businesses, local businesses, because it's dealing with resource issues, energy issues, and creating resilience as a whole against climate change as well. So I agree that moving towards a circular economy is definitely beneficial for everyone. For example, if small businesses could see that using reusable, this is the most basic, but using a reusable item instead of using plastic, they save a lot of money. Then they would move towards a more circular system. And for I have met business owners that have told me that they have spent a lot on, say, disposables, and they also recognize that consumers no longer want to buy that much plastic and dispose of it, so they switch towards compostables in Singapore, or cornware, certain types of what we would say slightly more greenwashed plastics that people think are safe. But in Singapore, since everything is incinerated, there's no difference. In fact, plastics have smaller footprint than, say, something that's compostable if you don't compost it. And we have no composting facilities. So they try to do this, but in the most superficial way, because they haven't done the research needed, or they are not going to do the research needed because they don't have the bandwidth. And not every business is going to do that. Some of them are just going to stick with their current suppliers because simply they don't have the bandwidth. They don't know if it's going to save them money. They don't know. They haven't done the accounting or the different business modeling to see if it will save them money. And that is definitely their bottom line for local businesses, which is why we have to, I guess, as circular economy consultants, or the government's role is also definitely to show them that there is alternatives that can take them out of their current mindset, that they are not going to try new things. Because, for small business owners, they always think that when you try a new thing, you're taking a risk. So when they are struggling, they don't want to take that risk. And we have to give them incentives to take this perceived risk. You can't just tell them sustainability is good for your business bottom line. They might not accept that.
So, I can what I see in my own practices is that there is also a tendency to use the circular economy in order to be less dependent on. Pre-COVID, Singapore was an importing country, importing and exporting hub. So a lot of materials just flew through the city and then out again. So there was very little internal market. One of the things that I actually see happening is that because of the situation, the country has become very aware of its dependency on external resources and is therefore more eager to actually start local production. And that can be of food, that can be of furniture, it can be of materials, but that is from almost like from a protective and resilient standpoint, a reason to start adopting circularity more. So very different from what we have might been expecting. There was a big fear on my side as well that because of the crisis, circularity would halt. But I can see a shift happening, that there is an interest from the perspective of resilience. I don't know if that is also in your experience, Patient.
For us, we had a huge food panic. I'm not sure if any of you guys experienced. I think you would have, which is supermarkets being wiped out. Produce that we are reliant on, and from Malaysia or from China, suddenly they just weren't coming, and then people would go to the supermarkets to hoard multiple times, and then that is how the government, or I'm sure the Singapore government has already realized that we definitely need internal food resilience and resource resilience, but this really made it really stuck, so that we couldn't always rely on outside supplies. And yeah, definitely they have moved certain things towards, after COVID, resilience. How are we going to protect our food supplies rather than just always importing? So all these things help us realize that we have to be reliant on ourselves. And this is also, in fact, a way to move towards circular economy. So that's good.
All right.
Yeah.
I think that with this question, oh, there was an easy question as well. If the presentation will be shared afterwards. Yes, of course. We will be sharing the slides and ways to engage with the speakers. With maybe the simple question, I would like to round up. Thank you all for putting in your questions in the chat box and for attending. I would also like to thank all the speakers for contributing, for writing the paper together, getting it out there and continuing the work. As mentioned, the next webinar for ReCirc, it will have a focus on plastics actually, and it will happen in co-hosted with the National Environment Agency of Singapore, and it will happen at the same time on November 26th. So it's free and open for registration. We will make sure to also share that link as well. And then after that webinar, we are also expecting the outcome of Kees's work on the mass flow analysis on water and other cycles in Singapore to be presented early next year. What we are then hoping is to start preparing for a real life event, and we are aiming and hoping that a conference will be possible again in July, so that we can hope to engage with you all during the Singapore International Water Week of 2021. All of the ReCirc partners will be there, and in the meantime, we are very happy to keep connected via Zoom, WebEx, or whatever platform will serve us best. Thank you all very much for joining, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your attention.